Our last stop on this virtual tour is going to be in one of our active learning classrooms to really show what the student experience is, on a typical day in the classroom. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that over to Casey.
Good morning. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Congratulations on your admissions to UIC. We're happy to have you here this morning and to get a chance to show you some of our great spaces on campus. My name is Casey Thayer. I'm one of the assistant directors for recruitment and engagement alongside Ashley, who's been so kind to show you around and host us today. And what we wanted to also show you, in addition to some of the resources that we talked about, one of the things that students have benefited, one thing that they benefit from at UIC are active learning classrooms. So when you think of college, you might imagine that kind of theater seating with the professor down in the front, kind of speaking out wisdom to the students, or one person described it as the lecture passes the notes from the professor to the notes to the students without going through anybody's brains. We do have some of those large lecture halls on campus, but we also do have a lot of active learning classroom spaces. And we're going to talk about that. It's right over my shoulder here. We'll get a chance to explore before we jump in there. I did also want to point out this is where our pre-health advisors are located as well. So we've talked about some of that additional support you get as a pre-health student if you're pursuing one of those pre-professional goals. We have advisors that are available to help with everything from choosing your classes to selecting volunteer work and research, to putting together your admission letters, to preparing for the entrance exam, the MCAT, the DAT, the Pharm D, getting all of the different entrance exams prepared for to get you into that professional program. But let's go ahead and take a look into one of our active learning classroom spaces. So come on in. So this is one of our active learning classrooms, mainly focused on the math and science classes. And what you'll see when you look around this classroom, instead of that kind of theater seating setup, you'll see a number of small tables scattered throughout. These tables seat about 5 to 6 students. And when you see a class being held in this space, students will be sitting around these different tables, working together on whatever course concepts they're reviewing. And what this allows for, these active learning spaces, they allow for more collaboration between students, and they allow for greater retention of materials, greater learning. They perform much higher and remember these concepts a lot more deeply. And some of the features, as we move through here, you'll have the students at these different spaces. Then right in the middle here, this is where you'll have the faculty or the instructor and the teaching assistants. This will be their home base, where they can use this centralized computer to broadcast images, problem sets, explanations on all these screens that are located around this space that correspond to these different tables. And they don't just stay up front here, but they'll be circling around the room, checking in with groups, giving each of these different student groups more individualized attention, and ultimately allows the students to work together to understand these concepts. So to take a little bit a closer look at the workspaces here. First off, you can write on these tables, and you also have a whiteboard where you can work out problems. And so what you'll typically see when you're in this classroom space and when we have students located here, you'll see students standing up, drawing on these whiteboards, talking to one another, working out these issues on their laptops. And then they also have these speakers in the center, these microphones, where they can broadcast out to the entire room. So the instructor might come and have the students explain something that they've come up with, and they can broadcast that out to the room. It's a large space. You can see how large it is and how expansive. And you would expect that when we get a lot of students in here working, it might get very loud, but it's actually a very quiet space. They've installed this kind of sound dampening on the ceiling. So when you come in here, it's a very studious, a very rigorous, but also very quiet space in which to learn. And we wanted to give you a greater insight on what it's actually like to be in the classroom at UIC, because we think we're fairly unique in the opportunities for collaboration between students and faculty, some of the spaces we have on campus. But I don't want you to just take my word for it. We wanted to get an actual insight from one of our students. So we're gonna go ahead and shift over to Lena. one of our students here who's going to introduce herself, and then we'll talk a little bit about what it's actually like to be in the classroom at UIC.
Hello guys, I hope all is well. First and foremost, congratulations into getting accepted into UIC. My name is Lena. I am currently a bio major in hopes of taking the MCAT. So I am pre-med. My first and second semester in UIC have been going great. And I know many of you guys have talked about it and addressed it, but I'm currently planning to pick a minor either in Latino studies or finance.
Great. So can you tell us first why you chose UIC?
So UIC actually around this time last year was my second choice. Therefore, I understand if many of you guys are very much undecided, especially because it is just a very important path to take in your life. Some of the reasons why I sided with UIC was because of the amazing research opportunities. I know Pasha already talked about it, but many of your professors in the future will be doing some sort of research at UIC. Therefore, you can have that opportunity to participate. Also, coming from a high school that was majority Hispanic, I also really wanted to get that experience with other cultures. Lastly, it was very affordable for me. So you definitely get the most out of your money.
And you talked a little bit about like kind of wanting that sense of diversity.
Mhm.
Have you found that at UIC?
Yeah, so both in the classroom and in the students, it's really more or less set me up for success. Like I said, the diversity in UIC was great. So it's definitely a mixing pot of ideas. And also a little bit more about the classroom. Lecture centers, usually typical like chemistry, Gen Ed 101. It's usually about 250 students, which I know can be intimidating. I came from a small private school, so my classrooms are very small, but just like letting you guys know, you guys are going to have a discussion section, usually with these typical science classes. So you guys get more or less like that one-on-one experience with a TA to help you out with anything.
Wonderful. How have you been able to kind of collaborate with other students, and how has that kind of helped your learning at UIC?
Yeah, definitely. So you are going to bump into a lot of ambitious students, which is more or less a great space to just get along with everyone. And I know it's a little intimidating, but I'm sure you guys are going to be great in this field. And I'm currently right now volunteering at Rush, and the Rush volunteering student body is more or less all UIC students. So I am volunteering with more upperclassmen UIC students, which they have been giving me more or less like that mentorship position in my life. So if you guys are getting involved in campus and in other places, you guys will find more or less that mentorship experience with upperclassmen, which is great. And I have found myself more or less like taking up their advice and like much of their mistakes that they've made, so I won't make them.
Could you talk a little bit about what the professors are like at UIC? So I think it's at like a research one university.
Yeah.
Oftentimes you're not getting that connection with professors. Have you been able to connect with professors, and what has that been like?
Yeah, so I actually have been able to connect with my professors. I mean, you, Casey. But because it's such a huge student body, professors, it's very hard for professors to more or less reach out. And personally, they won't really reach out to you. So it's more or less your job to reach out and try to build a connection with them. Thus, I mean, it's really your duty to reach out and make your presence known. More or less like the tips that I could give you is going to their office hours and asking questions maybe after class.
So talk a little bit about what kind of stands out, or what's been your favorite part of classes at UIC?
So as you guys might notice, I'm a very talkative person. So I love getting to meet people, and the fact that my classes are so big, I meet someone new every single day, and just getting to connect with those people and collaborate with them is amazing.
So if you had these are kind of newly admitted students, you already talked about the difficulty of selecting a college and selecting a path.
Mhm.
What advice, being a student who has recently gone through that yourself, would you offer to students in that experience or in that place?
Yeah, so as a first year student, I'm in my second semester right now. So I definitely have learned a lot. I feel like I've been at UIC for years now, but definitely take advantage of tutoring. I just went to tutoring last week in the past 2 semesters. So just taking advantage of that. I don't think many of you guys understand how much it helps. And like you crying because you don't understand a subject, like you don't have to do that. You could just reach out for help and there's always someone there. So yeah.
And do you think you're able to get help at UIC? Do you think UIC does a good job of supporting students with that kind of academic resources?
Yeah, definitely. So the tutoring center you guys were just at, I actually just went there last week and there's a chemistry TA there every single hour. So you definitely do get that help, whether it's after class or before.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Lena, for giving us that insight into the student experience at UIC. We'll go ahead and shift it back to Ashley for some closing comments.
Thank you so much for having me.